Elian began his journey under the soft, golden light of a newborn sun. In his hand, he carried a simple glass of water, clear, shimmering, and seemingly weightless. To an outward observer, the task appeared effortless. The morning air was cool, the forest path was wide, and he walked with the steady, confident stride of a man who believed that the weight of a burden was a fixed and manageable thing. Hours bled into the afternoon, and the vibrant greens of the forest began to deepen into long, shifting shadows. The glass itself had not changed, yet a subtle transformation was occurring within Elian. A dull, insistent ache began to pulse in his shoulder, creeping down his arm like a slow-moving tide. He realized then that the water wasn't growing heavier, it was the relentless duration of the hold that was beginning to drain his very spirit. By dusk, the forest had turned a bruised, anxious purple. Elian's features were tight with exhaustion, his brow slick with the sweat of a silent, agonizing struggle. That tiny glass, once a trifle, now felt like a jagged shard of mountain stone crushing his strength. He had become a prisoner to a handful of water, so terrified of failing the task that he no longer saw the ancient trees or the beauty of the path beneath his feet. He stood frozen in the dimming light, his muscles screaming for a reprieve that his rigid mind would not allow. A harsh internal judge insisted that to set the glass down was to fail, to be weak, or to abandon his purpose. He was caught in a tragic paradox. He was protecting a few ounces of water at the cost of his own breaking body, trapped by a rule he had long ago ceased to understand. Then, through the tangled brush, Elian witnessed a quiet miracle. A wild deer and its fawn stood at a nearby stream, bathed in a pool of defiant, golden sunlight. They moved with a lightness that felt like a silent rebuke to his own suffering, drinking deeply, unburdened, and carrying nothing but the grace of the present moment. He looked from the deer to his own trembling hand, seeing his struggle with new, startled eyes. He sank to his knees beside a great moss-covered sentinel of the woods. As he rested a hand against the gnarled, glowing roots, he felt the subterranean hum of the earth's ancient pulse. He understood then that this tree survived the centuries not by clutching its leaves against the winter wind, but by knowing exactly when to let them fall. It was the wisdom of the shed, the profound strength found in surrender. Standing alone in a misty clearing of night, Elian raised the glass high against the silver fog. He looked at it no longer as a task, but as a challenger. He questioned the invisible specter of his own stubbornness, realizing the water was never his enemy. The true burden was the unceasingness of his grip, the false belief that he was forbidden from finding rest until the journey was over. This realization acted as a key turning in a rusted lock. Elian's face smoothed into a calm, resolute stillness, and the frantic tension began to drain from his frame. He didn't need to reach the end of the forest to earn his peace. He needed to find that peace within himself just to survive the next mile. His grip softened, his breathing slowed, and the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. He sat upon a mossy stone and placed the glass safely on the ground beside him, watching as fireflies began to weave threads of light through the dark canopy. The lesson was written in the silence of the woods. It doesn't matter how light the burden is. If it is carried without rest, it will eventually break the carrier. To move forward with a clear heart, a man must first have the courage to put the glass down. As the first breath of sunrise touched the horizon, Elian stands and steps forward, leaving the glass behind on the mossy stone to find its own peace. He pauses and looks back over his shoulder, his expression now open and hopeful as he gazes directly toward the viewer. He knows that every soul carries a glass of its own, a past hurt, a rigid rule, or a quiet worry that has grown far too heavy. With a soft, knowing smile, he leaves you with a single question to carry into the morning. What is the weight you have been holding for too long, and are you finally ready to set it down and share your story in the comments?